Okay, Algebra 2 students, in this video we will be learning how to solve absolute value inequalities. Okay, absolute value inequalities, and let's fix that real quick. Your heading for today is lesson 1.7. Please copy that in your notes. Solving absolute value inequalities. Okay, solving absolute value inequalities, lesson 1.7, and be sure and include today's date. Okay, please copy this down. Solving absolute value inequalities, lesson 1.7, and be sure and include today's date. Alright, now let's continue on. This topic can be confusing. I'm not going to lie to you, okay? So please pay close attention, take really good notes, and listen to the steps that I'm going to give you. The steps will help you a lot, okay? Here is how we are going to attack this subject. First, I'm going to show you what one of these looks like, okay? Then I will give you the steps to solve them. Then we will solve about 4 or 5. And lastly, I will show you at the end why we used these steps, where they came from, okay? So here we go. Let's get into it right away. Here are the types of problems we're going to be dealing with today. Now notice they're called absolute value inequalities. So please write down this example, okay? This would be a model for an absolute value inequality. Put an absolute value symbol. Inside here we're going to put a x. You can put plus or minus, it doesn't matter. B is less than or greater than or less than, and then some number over here, we'll call it C, okay? Now that kind of looks like probably Greek to you guys, but go ahead and copy it down. Then I'm going to show you what one really looks like with numbers, okay? So this would be an absolute value inequality model, and it would look something like this. We might have 2x plus 6. You might have a number out here like this, minus 3. You might have a number right here, that's fine. And then an inequality symbol here. And then a number over here. Now please listen to me carefully. These absolute value symbols right here are not what makes this an absolute value inequality. It's not. Because you can have an absolute value with a 5 right here, and then an x over here equals 6. Do you see this? And this right here would not be an absolute value inequality. Here's why. Here's the difference. An absolute value inequality, or I put an inequality sign here, there we go. An absolute value inequality has the variable inside the absolute value. Okay? And notice there's no other unknowns. There's no other variables outside the absolute value. Okay? That's what makes this an absolute value inequality. I mean, look at this problem here. Do we have an absolute value? Yes. Do we have an inequality symbol? Yes. So why is this not an absolute value inequality? Because there's no x inside your absolute value. Okay? Or a variable x, y, or whatever. So, in order to have an absolute value inequality, you must have an inequality, and the variable you're solving for must be inside the absolute value. Okay? So there you go. They will look something like this. Okay? Alright, moving on. Here are the steps that you will need to solve these absolute value inequalities. Step number 1, isolate the absolute value. I'm going to go fast and walk you through these later. Step 2, rewrite the problem as, and hold on one second, don't copy that down. Okay students, I'm back. Notice I made a little change there. I had retyped this earlier and forgot to save it to this page here. So step 2. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. Step 2, rewrite the problem as either a conjunction or a disjunction. Remember, there should be a C right here, disjunction. Remember, I will explain all this to you later, okay? Step 3, solve the compound inequality. Okay? Mr. Earhart, what compound inequality? This one up here, remember? In step 2, you're going to rewrite the problem as a conjunction or a disjunction. These are called compound inequalities. So you're going to solve the compound inequality that you got from step 2. Step 4, write your answer in the correct form, and we'll talk about that later. And that's basically it. Okay, so let's give these steps a shot. Let's see how it goes. Let's work on 4 of these problems, okay? 4 of these. Here we go. Okay, copy this in your notes, please. If I go too fast, pause the video. Now, step 1 says isolate the absolute value, okay? Isolate the absolute value. Well, first of all, it's already isolated. I mean, here's your absolute value, and it's all by itself. Now, when I say isolate, here's what I mean. If you had a problem like this, don't copy this down, just watch. If you had a problem like this and you had plus 4 right here, or positive 4, then the absolute value would not be isolated. You'd have to get rid of this positive 4. Let's say there was a 3 right here on the outside being multiplied right here, right next to the absolute value. Well, the absolute value would not be isolated. You would have to first get rid of the 4 and then get rid of the 3 second. Okay? So when I say isolate the absolute value, I am not talking about anything on the inside of the absolute value. I'm talking about getting rid of everything on the outside of the absolute value. Do you see that okay? Alright, so when I say isolate the absolute value, I'm saying get rid of everything that's outside the absolute value, okay? Having said that, obviously, there's no isolating to do. This absolute value is all by itself. There are no numbers or variables on the outside. So step 2 says to rewrite the absolute value inequality as a conjunction or a disjunction. Now look, students, you're going to have to memorize this. Here it is. Are you ready? Write this down. If you have absolute values and then a less than symbol, that means you're going to have a conjunction. Please write that in your notes. Don't ever forget that. You're going to need to know that, okay? If you have an absolute value and then a greater than symbol, then this means you're going to have a disjunction. Okay? I'm going to pause a second while you copy that down. That's why step 2 said rewrite the problem as either a conjunction or a disjunction. It all depends on which direction your inequality symbol is facing. Got it? And notice I put absolute value then the inequality symbol because the absolute value is on the right side. That's totally different. We're not going to solve any like that, okay? So it's absolute value, then less than, you have a conjunction. If it's absolute value and then greater than, it's a disjunction. Now you're just going to have to remember that. One way to remember it, to be honest with you, is which one of these symbols looks more like a C. Doesn't this almost look like a C right here? Sure it does. So that's one way to remember it. And this doesn't look like a C at all right here. Okay? So that's one way. I think that's a good way to remember it. If this, whichever symbol looks almost like the letter C, then that's the one that's going to be a conjunction. Okay? Alright. Hope that helps a little bit. Okay. So step 1, isolate the absolute value. Step 2, rewrite it as a conjunction or disjunction. We have absolute values, then less than, so we're going to have a conjunction. So watch how I do this, okay? Watch carefully, please. Whatever. Oh, by the way, I'm going to say this again. If you don't do step 1 first, if you don't isolate the absolute value completely first, you will totally be guaranteed to miss the problem. You must isolate the absolute value first. Okay? Alright, now, this is so easy, guys. Whatever your number is here, you change the sign of it and put it over here. So I'll put a -5 here, and I'll put a +5 here. That's the easiest thing, guys. That's a piece of cake. So whatever the number is here. Now I'm still on step 2. Step 2 says to rewrite the problem as a conjunction or disjunction. So whatever this number is, you change the sign and put it here, and then bring it down and put it here. And then whatever this symbol is right here, you put it here and here. It's so easy. And then bring this down without the absolute values, just like that. Now, why, Mr. Earhart? some confidence, solve the problems, get some confidence, then we'll worry about y a little later, okay? So let's review. Isolate the absolute value, then rewrite it as a conjunction or disjunction. Now, how do you know which one to use? It depends which way this arrow is pointing, okay? It's pointing to the left, so it's a conjunction. Whatever this number is, you change the sign and put it here. Bring this number straight down here, don't do anything to it, and then whatever's inside the absolute values, you bring it down without the absolute values. Got it? Now, what the other steps say to do then? Solve the compound inequality and then write your answer in the correct form. Solve the compound inequality. Well, that's pretty easy. We know how to solve this. We want to get x all by itself, correct? Remember, we just learned how to solve these last week. We want to get x all by itself in the middle. So what two numbers do I want to get rid of? 2 and -3. Which one do you always get rid of last? The coefficient. So we have a -3. Move it out here, it becomes the +3. You also got to move it out here, it becomes the +3. So this -3 is now gone. So I have 2x in the middle. +5, +3 is +8. You owe me 5, you pay off 3, you now owe me 2. There we go. Now, divide everything by 2 to get x all by itself. -2 divided by 2 is -1. You're left with x in the middle. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now, when step 4 says, write your answer in correct form, we really could probably delete that step. I'm just reminding you to write your answer as a conjunction or disjunction. But if you solve it like you're supposed to, your answer will come out like it's supposed to. You started with the conjunction, you end with the conjunction, okay? That's not going to change. So there's your answer, okay? Now if I ask you to graph it, if I asked you to graph this absolute value inequality, if I said graph this right here, that'd make a great quiz or test question, by the way. If I asked you to graph this, you would first rewrite it so it looks like this, and then graph it. Critical values are -1, +4. We have equal signs here and here, so we close this point. We close this point, and there we go. X is greater than -1, and x is less than 4. So there you go. Okay, pretty simple. Alright, let's review. Isolate the absolute value, then rewrite it as a conjunction or disjunction, then solve it, and then write your answer in the correct form. Okay, let's try 3 more of these. Alright, now we're getting a little more difficult. Notice now we're going to have to isolate the absolute value. So step 1, isolate the absolute value. We do have something that we have to do. There is a number outside the absolute value we don't want, 7. So we're going to bring that over to the other side. So now I have absolute value, -5x, -4. Bring the 7 over and make it negative, and you're left with 4. Now, is the absolute value isolated? Most definitely. There are no numbers on the outside of the absolute value over here anywhere or over here anywhere. Now you say, what about the other side? Well, that's obvious. I'm talking about on the side where the absolute value is. Is it all by itself? And yes, it is. So now step 2, rewrite this as a conjunction or disjunction. Well, we have less than right here. Okay, so we know it's going to be a conjunction. So remember, whatever this number is here, you bring it straight down. Then you come over here and change the sign. And then write this right in the middle, -5x minus 4. Very simple. And then it's pointing this way, so we put it here and we put it here. There we go. Now step 3, solve it. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. Step 2, rewrite it as a conjunction or disjunction. How did I know it was a conjunction? Because the arrow is pointing to the left. And then step 3, solve this. Okay, no problem. I have to get rid of -5 and -4. So let's first bring the -4 out and make it positive, okay? So I'll put a +4 here and a +4 here, okay? So I'm left with 0 and 8, okay? -4, +4, 0, +4, +4, 8. Now divide everything by -5. Now we have to turn the arrows, okay? So we have 0 divided by -5. Turn the arrow, -5x divided by -5. Turn the arrow, So these cancel, leaving you with x. 0 divided by 5, negative 5 will be 0. If you want to put negative 0, you can, but really 0 is neither negative or positive. And then we have a positive 8 divided by a negative 5 is a negative 1 3/5, or you can leave it 8/5. There we go, there's your answer. Perfect. Now when I say step 4, write your answer in the correct form. Again, if you've set it up properly up here, your answer will be in the right form. If I asked you to graph that, no problem. 0 is a critical value right here. Negative 1 3/5 is a critical value right here. Both these points will be open because there's no equal sign here or here. Let's see, read it from the x. X is less than 0, so we're going this way. X is greater than negative 1 3/5, we're going this way. There's the graph right there. Okay, next problem. Okay, quite a bit of work to do on this one. If you choose to work ahead, that's fine, but I want to tell you one thing. Do not multiply the negative 4 through the absolute values. That's not what we're going to do, and that is not mathematically legal to do, okay? Do not do that, okay? Step 1, we're going to isolate the absolute value. Well, like usual, guys, this is kind of like a coefficient. It's being multiplied by this whole absolute value. Always get rid of that number last. So if you want to make a side note of that, feel free to. Always get rid of the multiplying number last. So if we're going to isolate the absolute value, we have to get rid of this number and this number. Negative 10 will be first, so I'm going to bring the negative 10 over and make it a positive 10. So I'm left with negative 4 times the absolute value of x plus 5 is less than or equal to negative 12. Got it? You owe me 22, you pay off 10, negative 12. Now, next, we have to get rid of this negative 4. Well, here's how you do it. You divide by negative 4, divide both sides by negative 4. Got it? So these cancel, leaving you with the absolute value of x plus 5. Now watch. Don't forget, guys, you got to turn your arrow. I'll bet you a lot of you forgot that. You got to turn your arrow. Negative divided by a negative is a positive 3. There we go. Okay? So, in order to isolate the absolute value, I first moved the negative 10 over and became positive. Then I divided by 4 because they're multiplying right here. So because they're multiplying, I divided by negative 4. And what this did was, it got the absolute value all by itself. Now step 1 is done. Step 2, rewrite this. Now, notice the arrow. Oh, by the way, remember how I told you to not skip step 1? Look up here. In the original problem, you had an arrow pointing this way, didn't you, to the left? So you might have thought it was going to be a what? Conjunction. But now look what happened after you isolated it. Now it's pointing to the right. That's why you must, and there are other reasons too, I'm not going to get into it. That's not the only reason. There are other reasons that if you don't isolate the absolute value first, you will miss these problems, okay? So now that I've isolated the absolute value, it's all by itself. I notice this is pointing to the right, so I know that I have a disjunction. Now we've not done one like this yet, so please pay attention, okay? First of all, you rewrite this just like it is. Without the absolute value, don't change anything. Always. You always do that. You write it just like it is, as if these two symbols here were not even there. That's easy, isn't it? That's a piece of cake. So the first thing you do is you write exactly what you have, only without the absolute values. Now next, you then put the word or, and then you do the exact same thing again. The exact same thing, only you turn the arrow and change the sign. You don't change the sign of this right here. You change the sign of the constant term right here. That's all by itself over here. Now guys, yes, you have to memorize this. But you have to admit, the actual math is very simple, okay? Now we're going to do another one like this in a minute, but we're not done yet. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. We did that. Step 2, write it as a conjunction or disjunction. We did it. Now solve this. So you guys learned last week how to solve, or you learned earlier how to solve a disjunction. You solve each of these and then bring the word or down, okay? So bring the 5 over, make it a negative 5. Positive 3, negative 5, that's negative 2. So I have x is less than or equal to -3, -5. You owe me $8. There we go. There's your answer. X is greater than or equal to -2, or I should slide that over, shouldn't I? Look like a 20. Or x is less than or equal to 8. There we go. If I asked you to graph it, here's 0, here's -2, here's -8. Both points will be closed. X is greater than -2, it's going to the right. X is less than -8, going to the left. We have a disjunction. All of these numbers work, or all of these numbers work. Guys, it's pretty cool. Listen, let's go back up, okay? If you will, isolate the absolute value completely, and then rewrite the problem as a conjunction or a disjunction. Remember, if it's pointing this way, doesn't that look more like a C than this does here? That looks like a C, kinda, okay? Then solve your compound inequality, then write your answer in the correct form. And again, if you've done it the right way, your answer will be in the correct form already, okay? One more, then I'm going to show you where we get these steps from, then we'll be finished, okay? Now, you can go ahead and, if you want to, you can pause the video, work this entire problem out yourself, or you can do it with me. But either way, make sure you get it right, okay? Alright, here we go. Step 1, isolate the absolute value. There are two numbers on the outside that I have to get rid of. 1, 2. Always get rid of the multiplying number last. So I'm going to bring my +5 over and make it a -5. Now, to get rid of a multiplying 2, I'm going to divide. And there we go. Okay? So now the absolute value is totally isolated. I got rid of the +5 and the +2. Now step 2, rewrite this as a conjunction or a disjunction. Well, it's pointing to the right. That's going to be a disjunction. So I write it just like it is, without the absolute value symbols. In fact, I'm gonna really emphasize this. I'm just gonna go like this. There we go. I mean, I'm just trying to show you how really simple this is. So first of all, you rewrite it like that. Then you rewrite it again. Only you turn the arrow and put a negative sign with this number here. Okay, let's solve this, okay? It's a +2. Bring it over, make it a -2. So I'm left with -3x is greater than 2. Now divide both sides by a negative number, -3. Don't forget to turn the arrow. These cancel. X is, turn the arrow. A positive divided by a negative is a -2 divided by 3 is 2/3. Or, now let's solve this one over here. -3x is less than, here's a +2. Bring it over, make it a -2. So you owe me $4, you owe me 2 more, that's -6. Now divide both sides by a -3. These will cancel, you're left with x. Don't forget to turn the arrow because you're dividing by a negative number. And then a negative divided by a negative is positive. 6 divided by 3 is 2. And just like that, you're finished. Just like that, you're done. Now if I asked you to graph it, here's 0, here's 2, here's -2/3. Open point, x is less than -2/3 going this way. X is greater than 2 going this way. Okay? So there we go. We solved 4 of these. What you need to do now is practice, but before we do that, real quick, I want to wrap this lesson up by showing you a couple of exceptions that you need to see, and then also show you why we use these steps that we used, okay? I want you to write in your notes this right here. Do you see right away how this would be no solution? And you're probably like, no, Mr. Earhart, why would it be no solution? I might give you one of these in a test or a quiz. You better listen, okay? I definitely test and quiz in a track 1 class very thoroughly to make sure you're taking good notes. So listen, guys, students, dudes, think about this. What number could did you put in for x that would be less than 0? Oh, I know, Mr. Hart, -2. Well, guys, if you put a -2 in for x, absolute value means make it positive. So if you put a -2 in for x, you would have this. The absolute value of -2 is 2. 2 is not less than 0. I am telling you, there is no number you can put in here that will give you out a true statement. I don't care what negative number you put in. I don't care if you put in 0. I don't care if you put in a positive number. It's no solution. It can't be done. Mr. Earhart, how can we learn to recognize problems like that? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Here's how you can recognize them. Anytime you have less than and then a 0 like this, it's no solution. Got it? So if it's less than, no, let me stop and say this. That's after the absolute value is isolated, okay? So if the absolute value is all by itself, okay, it has to be all by itself. If the absolute value is all by itself, and what you're left over with is the absolute value is less than 0, it's automatically no solution, okay? Automatically no solution. I'm kind of pausing so you can write that down if you want to. So after, big word, after you have isolated the absolute value in a problem, if you're left with less than 0 but no solution, what if it's less than or equal to? Then you would just simply say 0 is the answer. Because think about it, you can put 0 in for x, and the absolute value of 0 is 0, and 0 is less than or equal to 0. So if it's less than or equal to, then you would say 0 is the answer. Okay? Let me say that again. If its absolute value is less than or equal to 0, then 0 is your answer. But if it just says less than, like this, then it's no solution. Okay? No solution. Alright, now, let's talk about this. What if you, now listen, after you isolate the absolute value, okay? After you isolate the absolute value, what if you have this? Greater than 0. Greater than 0. Well, what would the answer be? Well, think about it. I don't care if you put -50 in here. It's going to come back out positive 50, and positive 50 is greater than 0. Got it? I don't care if you put 50 in for x. The absolute value is 50. The absolute value of 50 is 50. 50 is greater than 0. Okay? So, what I'm trying to show you is, if you isolate the absolute value and you have greater than 0 like this, then the answer is going to be all numbers except 0. Except 0, okay? All numbers except 0. Now if you have this, after you've isolated the absolute value, if you have this, then it would be all real numbers. And that's it, all real numbers. All numbers. Because it says equal to 0, so you could also put 0 in for x, and the absolute value is 0 is 0. 0 is greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so after you've isolated the absolute value, if you have this right here, and it could be, I guess I should be a little more specific, it could be x plus 5, it could be anything inside the absolute value, it could be anything inside the absolute value, it could be anything inside the absolute value, and I apologize for not saying that first, but that's okay, you can fix your notes quickly. Anything, I don't care what's inside this absolute value, as long as there's an x inside of it. If this absolute value is by itself and it says greater than 0, then here's your answer. If it says greater than or equal to 0, here's your answer. Over here, if it says less than 0, here's your answer. If it says this, less than or equal to 0, the answer is 0. Your answer is simply 0. Okay? Now write those down. Be familiar with those. Hint, hint. Those would make great quiz or test questions. So make sure you're familiar with these 4 exceptions, okay? And yes, I do know how to spell couple, okay? I just type quickly and don't really pay attention. So, alright, now, one more thing and I'm finally done, okay? One more thing and I'm finally done. Listen. Why did we have those steps? is greater than 5. What numbers could you put in for x to satisfy this equation? Well, you could put in, let's say, equal to. You could put in what? You could put in 5, 6, 7, dot, 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 right? 5 is greater than 5, 6 is greater than 5, 7 is greater than 5, but you could also put in what? Negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, because a negative 5 comes out of positive 5, a negative 6 comes out of negative 6, a negative 6 comes out of positive 6, a negative 7 comes out of positive 7. So all of these numbers here would also work. So really, here's what you have. I'm not going to quiz you or test you on this, but listen. So it's pointing to the right. We know it's going to be a disjunction. And look, the answer is what? It starts at 5, and it goes to the right, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the other answers start at negative 5 and go to the left, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7. So that's why we use those steps, and that's why when it's less than greater than like this point to the right, you get a disjunction. Now, real quick, what if I had this? Okay, real quick, think of some numbers that would work in here. It's got to be numbers less than 5 or equal to 5. Well, 5 would work, 4 would work, 3 would work, 2 would work, 1 would work, 0 would work, right? Any of those numbers you put in, they're less than 5, but also negative 1 would work, so would negative 2, so would negative 3, so would negative 4, so would negative 5. Negative 6 would not work. If you put a negative 6 in, you would get out a positive 6, and a positive 6 is not less than 5. So the answer to this problem here would be numbers between negative 5 and positive 5. Are you serious? That's a conjunction. Think about it. All the numbers between 5 and negative 5, that's a conjunction. So that's why when you're given a problem like this and it's pointing to the left, that's why you write it as a conjunction. Now, if you didn't get any of this, that's okay. I'm not going to test you on that one iota, okay? Not one bit, okay? However, I do want you to be familiar with the last stuff that I said about no solution and one solution and all numbers and stuff, all real numbers and stuff like that. But this here, you do not have to understand. Just some of you have really deep minds. You kind of like to know why. That's why we use those steps, okay? I hope this video has been a help to you. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or email.